All right. David, David Mears. I'm very, very excited to have David with me here today for season 2 of the Free Lunch podcast, where we continuing to have lunchtime conversations with interesting people who have been leaders in their areas. David's certainly one of those. So David and I have known each other for quite a while, and he has had a similar relationship to Spain, I would say, than as I've had. So, David, tell us a little bit about your kind of relationship with Spain when you first came here, why you first came here.
Deep relationship with Spain. I like it. It's been home for 25 years, Eddie, and as you know, and so I came here in the year 2000. Started to work in a creative agency in Madrid, and then got promoted, and I was running that agency for 2 or 3 years, and then set up my own agency. So, but with Spain, I've been now here for 25 years.
Yep. I suppose you and I did quite a lot together in those days. My background also in advertising, as many know, and I think we've got quite a lot in common in terms of our career paths, although you were much braver than me because in 2003 you just decided to do your own thing and set up your own agency. So what do you think made you take that step?
I think my decision was really based on the desire for autonomy. So I think I'm not sure at the time I really consciously thought about this very much. I think all most decisions in life are really based on a set of subconscious beliefs. We're not entirely sure why we're doing things, but if I'm to look back, I think probably I've learned about myself that what I most value in working life is autonomy. So if you have your own business, of course, there's more pressure, there's a bit more responsibility at some levels, but you do have the capacity to decide, um, or at least most of the time. And I think that's what I was driven by, really. So the idea of taking control, it definitely wasn't about becoming rich. That was never a goal. I just wanted to enjoy what I did, like it, enjoy the work, and feel that I had a strong sense of agency in what I was doing.
Yeah, I remember very well coming to your first office, which was, if I remember, extremely small. And you were sitting there on your own with a desk, and you gave me one of your new business cards. And of course, I just come from my nice, secure corporate job office to visit you, and I remember thinking, "Wow, yeah, he's a brave man doing this." And if I'm honest, I probably at this time was thinking, "We'll see how long before this all goes wrong." But actually, you did it, and you turned it into a real thing and worked with me on a number of really important projects. So if you think about the kind of the evolution of DMA, which was the name of the company, which I think started off as David Mears Associates and then just kind of
Well,
became.
the original idea was it was going to be me doing kind of boutique consultancy on brand, but of course, what happens is you start doing a little bit of that, and within a month or two, people start asking you to do more and more things. So very quickly, I started to get a team together, and some people came over and joined, and so very quickly it kind of turned into I would say a design agency, a graphic design agency, a creative communications agency.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the original idea. I had this silly idea really of it was just going to be me and maybe one other working on small projects in a very comfortable way and very manageable. And of course, that didn't really last for very long.
Well, it's very important to have a plan and very important to be ready to change the
Yeah,
plan
I have to
when
adapt,
something.
and it was, of course, because we grew. So we grew because we were doing what we were doing well at the time.
And when correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me like DMA went on a bit of a journey over the 20, almost 25, 21 years.
21 years,
Okay,
yeah.
and we'll talk about kind of where it's got to now in a minute. But obviously there were certain things that happened. The financial crisis arrived in the middle of it, then COVID. I think at one point you had like 20 odd people
Yeah,
working DMA,
yeah,
but then at other times you had quite a lot less than that.
yeah.
So maybe just tell me a bit about kind of that journey and some of the key things you think about when, I mean, I guess I'm thinking about people listening to this who are thinking of starting a business. They're all excited about it. They're sitting in their little office on their own with their first business card. And nowadays people probably don't have business cards. And what kind of thoughts would you give to those people in terms of your experience?
And do it. If you can get on with it and enjoy it, and I think be really good at what you do, try and be good, the best you can be. You've got to love the work.
Right.
I think it's very important. And it sounds very cliched, and that word tends to be rather overused, the kind of passion and love. But you really do need to like what you do. And I think if you're not actually genuinely interested in it and you're not wanting the best for your clients, then I think you're in the wrong industry.
Yeah.
It's the creative industries are demanding in the sense that every time you start a project, more or less, you're starting from scratch. So this is not a business where you get a machine and you produce sunflower seeds ad infinitum. This is a project that requires human intervention, creativity, energy. Clients are coming to you because they're looking for creativity and want energy, and that's got to be there. So it's demanding in that sense. So you need some good people.
Yeah.
You've got to have some good people in the team. You can't do it on your own. That takes time, and you will make some mistakes, I think, with people. Not everybody works out well. I think I was very, very fortunate because I would say the majority of people that joined and worked with me were really good, both professionally and good people. And I would say the success ratio was quite high. And that's really important.
Yeah.
You've got to have some stability with that.
Well, do you have any kind of David's law on what to look for when you're hiring people, or that process? Because I think just to answer my own question myself, I would say after all of the people that I've involved hiring, actually, I kind of come away thinking, no, I don't have a clever solution. And a lot of it's intuition. And some of the people that kind of on paper looked like they were going to be really good turned out to be disappointing. And I was kind of pushed into it by HR saying, oh, this person ticks all the boxes. And I was like, and this person I like. And they're like, oh, no, look, there's all lots of reasons why they're no good. And actually that person turned out to be quite successful. So to me, it's almost like a 50-50.
Yeah.
Is that your experience?
I think we did a bit better than 50-50, but not because of our own merit. I think that was an element of luck.
Right.
But I agree with you. I think it's very difficult. I mean, there is no formula. I think if there were to be a formula, we'd all be using it.
Right.
It'd be a bit like making an omelette. You kind of get a video on YouTube. You do it. If you do it like that, it will come out fine. But
I think that's a little bit what sometimes, don't want to be mean about human resource departments, but they try to do that a bit. They try to sort of say, well, we've got our system for hiring people, and I'm just never very convinced.
No, because it's people, and all of that is generally not systemic. I think also sometimes you can have good people who don't work in certain environments. Say famously in the world of football, you have one manager who's very well in one club but very badly in the next one. It's not because they're no good, but the circumstances do matter. So the kind of work you have, the kind of clients you have, the kind of environment that you have, and the people around them. So will that person fit into the group? And by fitting, that doesn't mean they need to be the same, but will there be a certain kind of cohesion in the team? That's important.
You used to get your colleagues to interview people. Sure.
Yeah, I did try to. I mean, I can't say I always did that. And in fact, some of the people might say I didn't do that at all, but I remember doing that. I seem to remember doing that. You also need talent. I think you've got to look. This is, I think, definitely in the industry we're in, the creative industry and design. You need someone who you've got to see something in their work. So there's got to be what do they actually do? And I think sometimes in recruitment, HR teams might focus on what education someone's got. Have they got that degree or this degree? And have they done a master's here or there? And have they done a course in animation? But all of that is good. But that doesn't necessarily mean anyone's got the kind of spark you need. And so you need someone who's got some creative talent.
Right.
And that's something I think you see in the work. So I was always very keen on looking at the work, not so much at the CV.
Okay.
And I think also you're always looking for, as we all do in human relations, you're looking for the clues which are not so obvious. So how do they speak? Are they respectful? Do they arrive on time? Do you get the sense that they actually want to do this? Because I think sometimes you can get CVs and you get a portfolio and it's all good. But what you kind of feel is that they're not really that into it.
I think I really agree with you what you said earlier about the kind of the passion, but not necessarily saying this is the thing I want to do in my life. This is my great passion. With work, I've never been very convinced that's the way forward. But I do think you've got to be passionate about what you're doing at that moment. right? So if you're going to come in and have creative ideas, and if you're going to stand up in front of somebody and sell them that idea, something that I've done many times, if I haven't believed in it myself and I didn't feel excited, it was impossible. Yeah. So I think I completely agree with you about that. It's interesting. So you get the company going, you get some interesting clients, you're doing some good work, and then various curveballs come your way. So I mean, I'm really keen to hear your views on the pandemic and kind of how you sort of weathered that storm. But maybe the first one was the global
Yeah, so
financial.
we basically had from the first year through to 2008, we had pretty much a straight line graphic,
Right.
45 degrees up.
Yeah.
So growth, and I thought, well, this is all very straightforward. You basically turn up and it just doubles every year, which is more or less what happened.
Right.
So the team got bigger, pretty much year on year doubled, and we got to decent size around 2008. And then there was the banking crisis. We had a couple of late night phone calls from clients saying we're cancelling,
Yeah.
but not just a little project, but entire swathes of work. And that is very hard. And although, as always, when there's a storm in life, you don't sit around too much thinking about how hard it is. You just think, okay, what can we actually do?
Yeah.
So I can't honestly say that it was so terribly tough. It's just you do have to make very difficult decisions. It's not nice because you have to let people go. And you have to cut back. It's simple as that. You've got to get your costs back to a place where the revenue can support it. So it's not easy, but then that passed kind of,
Yeah.
and then some years went by which are relatively stable, and I would say pretty good. And we always had a decent business in terms of it always made sense financially.
Yeah.
Because I always ran it a very, very simple way, which
Yeah.
was kind of make sure there's more coming in than there is going out.
Yeah.
And avoid debt and avoid overstretching.
Yeah.
And so that's always a bit of a fine with this kind of agency, which is always based around people.
Yeah.
Same as a law firm. You're always in the kind of slight dialogue. Let's just call it a kind of creative dialogue between you need to get some people in order to grow, but you don't want to have so many people ahead of growth. I mean, you need to kind of that you have to kind of manage it. And then we had, of course, the pandemic. Well, what can I say about the pandemic? It's not really been said. I mean, it was obviously catastrophic for everybody, really, and for us. And so we got into the whole business of furlough.
Yeah.
Everybody obviously went home to work, which was new. I've been kind of digitally nomadic myself. As the owner, I was always out and about, with clients and projects and working. So I've been sitting in coffee shop since 2003, really, so more or less. But the team itself we had a studio in Madrid. We had most of the people based in Madrid.
Yeah.
We did use some freelance people, but that was a big change. So people went home and they didn't come back.
Yeah.
When they did come back, everything had changed a bit in terms of what people wanted from work, what they expected. So we had to kind of navigate that a bit.
It was such a tremendously quick change, wasn't it? If you think that offices kind of evolved after let's say after the Second World War, or sort of around that time, was suddenly the sort of life in the office began to be a thing. And through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and when we started working, off we go on the tube every morning, get to the office, never enter our head to say, oh, I thought I might stay at home today. And suddenly then the pandemic hits at the same time as the technology, very fortunately, is good enough for people to be at home. And suddenly the whole thing's turned on its head. And right now, I think we are seeing a lot of companies struggling to work out what to do, where they will ask people to come into the office. They'll get a lot of pushback from people. They talk about wanting the culture to get back on track, and yet the office that the people come to isn't the office of before. It's now a place with shared desks and no photos of the kids and that sort of stuff, or flowers, and it's kind of all changed. So I know you have thoughts on this, and I'm really interested to hear kind of in general what you feel about that subject, but also what your own personal experience has been in DMA of kind of trying to handle the remote work kind of stall there.
So, I mean, as always in life, truth is complicated. It's not either black or white. I think one of the things I find frustrating about that debate in the last few years, it's tend to become like so many other debates we seem to have gone into a world where things get polarized. So you're either kind of for it or against it. And I think that's not necessarily how I would see it. I think that I don't really believe fully in remote work nor fully in office work nor fully in hybrid. I think that each company's got to find its own way.
Right.
I don't think the remote work works for some things as well as some people think it does. So I think and I can only speak for our industry. So the creative industry, I think, do depend on collaboration. And I think that collaboration can't always be predictable in terms of we're going to do it at 10 o'clock on Zoom on a Tuesday morning. I think it does need to be more organic than that. So I think you need people in a room together at least some of the time. But then when they are there, they need to be present. So it can't be that they come in and spend 8 hours a day with their headphones on Zoom calls with clients, because that's a bit pointless. As you said, sometimes people say, well, I went back to the office and there's no one there.
Yeah.
So therefore, what's the point going? And there's no point going merely just to kind of tick a box to say that we're sitting here in the office. So you have to think, what are we actually doing in the office?
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think is one of the things that bigger companies are struggling with at the moment, which is, excuse me, how do we get people to come back to the office, but then actually make sure that the time in the office is more than that, more than just sitting there with headphones? Because obviously we ideally need everyone to come back on the same day, or we want to almost create the old-fashioned style of office for a week, which is extremely difficult.
Well, the same day and then the same predisposition. So the same sense in which people are actually coming with the idea that you're sitting with other people and they're open to talk to you, and that collaboration can happen in a kind of in a way which is I would say unpredictable. And I think that is an important element of being in office, that it's not just it's not that thing about it's great because you have a coffee or you meet people at the water cooler. To me, that's of low value. The bit that I think happens is you say, I'm working on this.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Right.
That should be blue instead of green. This looks a bit too big. That headline doesn't really work. And all of that kind of learning and ritual growth, I think, I'm not quite sure where that goes when I have people sitting at home all day.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think there is another issue, which is just on a much more simple human level, which is that in pretty much every other dimension of life since the pandemic, we've gone back to how we were. So we still go over to the cinema, we go to restaurants, we go on holidays, we go on aeroplanes. No one really has suggested that schools stay remote, nor that universities stay remote. So are there options remotely to learn? Yes, there are. But fundamentally, if someone's going to go off and do a degree, the tendency is for them to think, I'm going to go to university. So I do wonder quite why we're so somewhat trapped in, I think it's a kind of entrapment, this idea that work has got to be different. And of course, the reason is we like it.
Right.
And who wouldn't? I mean, I do get that. I mean, of course.
And do you think people's attitudes have changed in terms of, shall we say, the employee?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I think that, and I don't think it's wrong either. I mean, I think it's quite natural that things evolve. So, someone 22 now is going to want somewhat different things to what I wanted when I was 22, because the world has changed. They can see that.
Yeah.
And so I think what people are prepared to do in order to get a salary has changed. So the fundamental kind of power balance has shifted to the extent that people say, well, I just don't really want to give up this liberty and freedom that I have working from home, and I can kind of pick up my Mac and I can go and sit in a Starbucks up the road for an hour or two, and I can take a walk mid-morning because I feel like it.
Yeah.
I can do my yoga in the back garden and all of that. Of course, people have become attached to it for reasons which I fully understand. Who wouldn't? I mean, if you give someone more choice, more freedom, more flexibility, by and large, they're going to like it.
Yeah.
So,
but it's interesting because there's been a sort of a shift as well in entitlement and how people talk about things. So I think probably fairly safe to say when you and I first started working, we went to the office, we stayed there all day, and in the evening we had our plans, right? And if the boss said, this evening I need to work late, we cancelled our plans.
Yes.
And I'm not defending that as saying that was all wonderful in the old days. I'm just saying that's how it was, right? But now, for example, I think if someone has their tennis class at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, they actually feel like, well, sorry, boss, I have my tennis class.
Yeah, that would be absolutely bored into their agenda. And yeah, I think that's true. I think people are much less flexible around to what extent you're prepared to give up your personal freedoms in order for some kind of corporate good.
Yeah.
And that pendulum, I guess, is kind of swinging backwards and forwards. So, if you go back to when my grandfather was working, there were 6 days a week with 3 or 4 days holiday a year. And certainly no question of discussing whether you had to get out out of his place of work in order to go and receive an order from HelloFresh, So all of that has changed, and by and large for the good.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's absolutely, it's an evolution. Now, one thing is that I can totally see how somebody that knows how to do a job and has done that job for, let's say, 10 years, and they know the people and they know the systems, and their job is to, do something fairly administrative with a need to perhaps communicate with certain people, which they can do from home, that they can go to the office. So I think that is a great remote job.
Yeah.
But what about very young people who are just starting off, who need to learn the ropes? What about the conversation I had the other day with somebody who works in a pharmaceutical company, who said, we have an issue, which is that all of our lab people have to come into the lab. They can't do their experiments in the kitchen at home. And they're getting more and more annoyed because we allow 1 day a week, and yet actually to do their job properly, they can't really be at home 1 day a week. And this is beginning to become
Yeah,
not
we've seen that with our clients, that
right.
there's a definite move back to offices,
Mhm.
because it's not. We always talk about the office as if it was a uniform kind of workspace, and
Right.
it's not. I mean,
Right.
a lot of people are going to places of work where they depend on equipment, machinery, technology. It's not just an office is not a purely neutral place with a desk and a computer.
Yeah.
So it does depend on what people are doing,
Yeah.
and then there is a question of fairness. If you take a workforce, you're talking about highly qualified people who've studied for many years. Why is it that they should be forced to go to work because of the nature of their job, whereas their colleague can sit at home all day?
Yeah.
And that doesn't.
I suppose it'll just become part of your decision making about what you want to do in life, because some jobs become more the home base. I remember a little cartoon I saw once of a soldier with his machine gun saying to his sergeant, "And will I be able to fight from home, Sarge?" I mean, in a way, yeah, it's kind of, this is the issue, right? You know.
So I think we've got a way to go with all this. And I think there's going to be some shifting sands. And my final kind of observation about it is just I'm not sure that, as you say, if someone's been doing a job for a long time, they've got a very good social network and a professional network, you can see how it can make a lot of sense. Someone who's starting out, I'm not even sure that physically or mentally, it's, from mental health perspective, I'm not sure how fantastic it really is. If they're genuinely going to be sitting for 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day at a computer,
Yeah.
if that really is their life, if they can get to a place where they can do that with other people, which is within a reasonable commuting, if they've got a 20-minute walk,
Yeah.
it's quite hard to see what the advantage is of being at home on their own without the social contact and without the professional engagement. But
And there is still something to be said for having a shave, brushing your hair, putting on some
all of that,
clean clothes, not
yeah,
not wearing your pajamas.
getting out the door, yeah, definitely. And that's that. And the thing is, human beings, I think, very often what we want and what we need are two different things. So of course we like the idea of all of that freedom and everything. We all do, me included. But then when we get it, actually, we might actually have been happier
Right.
with the other.
Yeah.
Having a bit more discipline, a bit more direction in our life, a bit more sense of some tram lines. Essentially, we tend to operate better inside some tram lines.
And it's also true that stuff happens to us humans, like, for example, the arrival of smartphones, and there's no putting that back in the box. Once you've got it,
Yeah,
you're going to
for
keep
sure.
it forever. So just going to slightly kind of more personal, about your own feelings. So as the boss, as the leader of this company, you find yourself in a situation where you've got key people who no longer want to come in regularly. They want to work from home. How did that make you feel as the owner of the business?
Um, I don't think it was a feeling question. It was more, from my point of view, just a question of, are we able to do the work as well as we used to be able to do it? And at a certain point, I think the answer was no.
Okay.
And it did depend on the person. But in general terms, I would say it became more difficult to get a sense of cohesion, a sense of collaboration. And when I say collaboration, it's not some kind of airy fairy concept. I mean, this is really practical stuff. This is, I'm working on this bit of the project, you're working on that bit.
Yeah.
And we can check in every few minutes. Whereas someone gets the brief in the morning, they go off. Later that afternoon, someone says, "Oh, how are you getting on?" And they kind of say, "Well, I've done this." You think that's not really we've spent quite a lot of time going nowhere.
Right.
Through no fault of their own.
We need to talk again. Well, I can't because I've got to collect the kids from school, and that's my tennis class.
Exactly. And then, we'll have a call tomorrow. Okay, fine. 9:30. No, because I've got a call with the client at 9:30. Okay, so 10:30. Okay, no, 11. So in fact, that little 1 minute interaction has somehow been moved around and pushed into the and it becomes inefficient. And I think that was my principal preoccupation, that we were finding it harder to produce high quality work at speed.
And how did you find? Did people push back when you tried to get everyone back together?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I understood that. I mean, I completely understood that. And I think the frustration is, for me, it was never really about kind of you're either for this or against it, or you're a bad old git boss who wants to get everyone back in the office because you control. That was never really the point for me. It was just, I don't think this is working for the kind of business that we are, or that we aspire to be. So, and we fiddled with it, and we tried, a bit of hybrid. We did, and I would say that with varying degrees of success. And I was always trying to find a kind of balance where everybody would be happy. That's not always possible in life, as we all know, Eddie. Keeping all the people happy is not easy. You do get that.
Impossible.
Correct. And then you get some people say, well, it's not fair because he's there, he's working from home, why can't I? And so, those issues do become, I think, quite real. I don't have any answers, by the way. I mean, I think this is all just to be discussed and to be experienced for everyone.
And it's going to evolve. I mean, that's one of the things that's so interesting about it, is that the sort of idea of the sort of digital immigrants and the digital natives, when you think of younger people, it's not going to be that long before the people who are coming into the workforce for the first time, they've been known pre-pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
And then how will they cope with that? And how will that be different? Because the old way of thinking of, it used to be like this.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the same way that when we started work, we didn't want to work in the way that people were working 20 years before.
Yeah, exactly.
And would have thought that was ridiculous. So the fact that I used to kind of have a letter drawn up and then fax it to my client in the late 1980s, it all sounds completely ridiculous. And to my son, that's not something that's really relevant to him in terms of how he's going to do his job.
Yeah, no, I think definitely everyone goes to the office all day, every day, Monday to Friday. That ship has, I think, sailed, as an absolute standard norm. What blend you end up with, I think, is rather like a wine. You end up with kind of, one grape or three, and it will be a whole mixture, I think.
Well, I think your point is a really good one, which actually is, let's just keep focused on the business, which is what does the business require?
Correct.
And I think perhaps one of the things that's going to happen is, if the business doesn't really require it, but the company insists on something that the business doesn't require, that's when there may be issues.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Forcing people
are intelligent. I mean, I think people can see as well. I think these are problems you can share with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So slightly changing direction, let's just talk about leadership for a couple of minutes. So if you look back at yourself and all these things you've been through, what kind of leader do you think you are?
Well, with strengths and weaknesses, I'd say. I mean, what kind of leader are you? I mean,
No, I asked the question.
Okay. So I think I'm good at some things, and I'm not so good at others, Eddie. So I think I'm good at getting things done. So I can resolve things. I'm quite quick. I think I used to have a pretty clear idea of what we were trying to achieve. And clarity, I would say, would be generally good. I think that over time, I could have done better at bringing people along. So I think also there are certain kinds of people that respond to certain kinds of leadership. So I think you can be quite successful with a certain kind of person, but that same skill set might not work terribly well with other kinds of people. So in general terms, I would say, from my perspective, the key element of leadership, I'm not even sure I love the word leadership, because it always reminds me of kind of, we're going to go marching into Germany or something. I mean, I think this is just a business. This is not a political party, nor is it an ideological movement. It's a business, and therefore relatively simple, I think. I mean, it's not that complicated, but I think the key is really, you have to be showing rather than talking. So doing it rather than talking about it. So if people can see that you're very driven and that you're interested in what you're doing and you care about the result, that is most of what you should usefully be doing, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the more you're talking about leadership and the more you're talking about your values and your mission and all the rest of it, but that becomes disconnected from what people actually see in the day to day,
Right.
then I think you're going to have a bad time. So I think when I was at my most effective was when my energy levels were high and when I was the one who was in early and leaving late. Not that we ever did that, actually. We were pretty good at the kind of having a sensible work period, unlike a lot of agencies that would do sort of late nights. And we, from an early stage, I thought I didn't want that kind of life. So we worked, I would say, quite intensely in a normal timetable. And when people can see you engaged and that you're fired up about the work and you care, that's I would say, the key point, really.
No, I think that's very, very true. And I always say that whatever the leader is doing, the boss, whatever, it gives permission to the rest of the team. So if you're the kind of person that uses a lot of swear words, turns up late for most meetings, gets very annoyed easily, people will do that because you give them permission to do it. And if, on the other hand, you're very thoughtful and kind and you're very efficient and you answer people's emails quickly, then people will probably do that too.
Yeah, so I would say it kind of pretty much reflected and mirrored my own emotional state.
Right.
Hence, therefore, there are some highs and there are some lows because when you're running a business which is relatively small, you're always your business. I mean, and I laugh about this sometimes with friends, but if I were to look at the graph of DMA, it does tend to follow. It tends to follow quite closely the graph of me.
The graph of DM.
So yes, if I'm in the mood and if I'm up for it, and I'm interested and I'm engaged, then everything tends to go a lot better.
Which, by the way, means why I wouldn't 100% agree with you that leadership isn't important, because the point is that you are the leader of that.
I suppose what I mean is the theorizing of leadership and the conversion of it into a kind of an academic subject.
Right.
And I've been in plenty of meetings with very large clients where there's sort of whole swathes of material produced about leadership and what we're all going to do and how we're going to do it. But you think, yeah, I know, but that's all very well. But this meeting we've just been in has been over-attended in terms of time, the number of people. He's been inconclusive. So therefore, it's hard there'll be a real kind of disconnect between what we say we're trying to do and what we're actually doing. So I think
and there's also something like when we're talking about hiring people and how you just sort of know that somebody's going to be good and going to work well with you. And that strange thing that I observe sometimes over the years where somebody would be trying very hard to be a good leader and they would read in a book that you should do this. You should write everybody a handwritten note. And I actually remember a colleague of mine receiving a handwritten note and saying, what does this person think I'm going to do with this note? And I thought that's so sad because they were really trying hard. And yet somehow it didn't work. Right.
It has to be genuine. Like, I think people are really smart. We've got, thousands of years of human history evolving to detect what's going on around us and to be attuned to the environment and to pick up non-verbal signals. So I think if you're not genuine and if you don't really care about the work and if you don't care about the result, you're not actually genuinely interested in the client, the people will pick that up straight away. And of course they will then say, well, why should I be? I mean, they won't consciously say that. They'll keep on doing their job, but the level will just drop a little bit and then it will drop a little bit more. And until
there's a separation.
Correct. Until you turn around and say, we're not as good as we used to be. And that can happen. I mean, you have periods. That's life. It's not always going to be great.
And when you look at the sort of bigger world and you think about people, I mean, there's a lot of talk about leadership at the moment. We've got some very big leaders in the world right now that make a lot of noise and do a lot of things and do a lot of press conferences. What do you think about that? What do you look for what do you look for in big leaders of countries and that kind of stuff?
I mean, my criteria would be I'm looking for someone sensible, someone who appears to be decent. I understand in politics you can't always tell the truth. That's really not feasible. I think that it's a tricky world, and you're managing a lot of complex situations. So I understand you're not always going to get perfection, but I think from my perspective, I'd be looking for someone who is interested in the public good and a genuine interest in the public good and making things better. And I think for me, that's more important than whether their policies are slightly to the left or slightly to the right. I mean, I myself would be a centrist. I'm not wild. I'm not don't want to get into politics here very much, but I'm not particularly interested in extreme right nor extreme left. I don't think that's generally where things work. I think where things work is when we all agree about the things that we all agree on.
And do we
find
see those kind of leaders, though?
No,
Right.
not enough. And the ones that are there at the moment are currently not kind of getting heard because there are some bigger voices. We're not going to mention any names here, but I mean, it's and I think it's actually, the subject is much beyond naming names. It's a kind of big philosophical question for society. What kind of society do we want to be? How do we see ourselves reflected? Is that what we want to be? Is that how we wish to be spoken on behalf of? And to be,
but I would argue does come right down into, companies like DMA and other corporations, and you look at the way that countries are being led, and then it can help to kind of set how companies will be led. But and I think one area that's really interesting is the area of charisma, which is that impossible to define thing. And yet, how is it that we have some leaders who are clearly not trustworthy? They clearly tell lies. Everybody knows they tell lies, and yet somehow a lot of people follow them and actually follow them in a very, very strong way. Why do you think that is?
Poof. I don't know. I guess it's something to do with our desire. I think we want a belief system. So, and this is, I haven't thought about this terribly much, but just I'm going to throw it out there because it's a conversation, right? So, I mean, in the absence of religion, in the absence of other fairy tales, I'm not saying religion is a fairy tale, but we're looking for some kind of belief system. And if we plug into a leader who might tell us that life will get better like this, and that connects at the same time to some fundamental unhappiness, which might well be very justified about the way in which we're living now. We don't like something about the way we are living. We don't like our professional prospects. We don't like our income levels dropping. We don't like the fact taxes got higher and income has got lower for the middle class. So all these things have become the perfect petri dish for that dissatisfaction. And if someone comes along and says, we can fix this, we want to believe. I mean, human beings, we want to plug on into something. So I guess, is that it, Eddie?
Yeah, maybe.
What's your...
And I mean, I don't know. I think that one thing that's really interesting is the idea of being able to blame somebody else for things. So that's sort of the they, right? The people who do bad stuff to us. And that's interesting because you can do that as a country leader. You can say, those people over there are bad guys, so we are going to do things differently here to make sure we win. And you can do that in sports, but you don't really do that in the business world. You can't really build a company based on the idea that we're here to completely overrun everybody else. It doesn't quite work that way, does it? I mean, maybe some companies do. But so it sort of requires a slightly different kind of leadership where you need to enthuse people to believe as opposed to make them scared by believing there's something more scary out there, which I don't know. I think we could talk about that all day.
You sure could. I mean, and I find myself as living what I think we all slightly feel are kind of turbulent times. And I'm not sure that, sometimes I'm not sure it's more turbulent because it is more turbulent because the way that we communicate now is so 24/7.
I agree.
It's so intense. We're so prompted all day, every day with pictures and images and videos. And of course, it's very hard to be tranquil in that kind of communicative context. So I sometimes wonder if you were to just kind of, we all could calm down a bit and think, well, actually, maybe the world geopolitically wise is no worse than it would have been 30 years ago, 60 years ago, 90, 120. The world has always been tumultuous.
I agree. I mean, and if you look at history, tremendous amount of things were going on all the time. Some of them were quite a lot worse than things that happen now. I've often thought about people who lived in sort of central parts of Europe during the end of the 1700s, where Napoleon would come along, take over, and then maybe 6 months later, the Prussians would come along, kick Napoleon out, and you're in your village trying to kind of get on with life and plant your wheat, and you'd be like, oh, Napoleon's here now, oh, it's Prussians now, but you wouldn't find out for weeks after it all happened. Oh, the Battle of Austerlitz took place. Oh, who won? Oh, okay, does that mean they're in charge now? Right. And as you say, if this was all on
if you were getting a feed,
this is all on Twitter
every day, no wonder we get a bit kind of agitated with the whole thing. And so I find myself wanting to somehow disconnect to a large extent from this, which doesn't mean I want to go on a kind of a news famine. But at the same time, I think it's not helpful to be prompted so many times a day with every single little twist and turn in
Right.
in the political world, because it's kind of sort of slightly mentally destabilizing.
But also, I mean, so there's different elements, isn't there? There's the fact that someone gets bitten by a shark in Australia and we know about it within 5 minutes. So every single thing that can go wrong in the world, we can find out about it instantly.
Yeah.
But also the fact that the way that technology is going, that a lot of people will very happily consume the news about that particular leader or that particular situation that they want to hear. And so if you're probably like you and me, that we want to know what happened, that's increasingly difficult. And so leadership, perhaps at the higher level, starts to become almost a kind of manipulation, because you've got to kind of give the story all the time that fits with what all your followers believe. Yeah. So interesting stuff. Well, talking about technology, that's a sort of little bit of a lead into the other thing that I want to talk about. And I've warned you that in season 2, I want to sort of ask everybody the same question, which is about our friend AI. In some ways, there's a side of
Ingram.
Yes, Arthur Ingram, lovely chat. There's a side of me that doesn't want to talk about it because I feel like everybody is talking about it, but then it really is absolutely happening. I'm kind of shocked by the speed at which it's happening. 2 or 3 years ago, nobody kind of knew anything about this, and ChatGPT was, we all pretended we used it, and now people use it every single day, and it's become really important in people's lives. But that's the sort of the reality of now. But what I think is interesting is, where do we think this is going? And particularly in your area that you obviously know about, which is the creative world. So my fundamental exam question is, AI, friend or foe? And so I'm super interested to hear your thoughts on kind of what you've seen in the last couple of years, what you see happening, and where you think this will lead us.
Friend.
Okay, great.
Yeah, friend. Which is not to say that it is not without its problems and its challenges, because like all friendships, there will be issues. But I don't think that, I should start by saying I'm not an expert on this. So I don't work for Anthropic. I'm not sitting in the middle of Google. I mean, I've run a creative industry agency, and so we use AI like everybody else does for some things some of the time. We can see how it's radically transforming the processes of what we do, or it can. But I would say friend, because I think my fundamental kind of overarching view on this would be that in the end, human beings will remain at the top of the food chain.
Okay.
Because we have to.
Yeah.
Because that's our fundamental nature, which is survive. In any given moment, if we decide to pull the plug literally on the wall that's plugging all this, so we've got great big kind of data centers being built all over the place to deal with all this stuff. At any given moment, when we start to see that this is leading us to dystopian consequences, we will have the option of pulling the plug on it.
Yeah.
So we do actually remain at some level in control. So I don't quite buy into the kind of the world is going to end because of AI, they're going to take us off because it's robots, because we'll still be, I think at some level, we have a agency in this.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of the sort of supra kind of philosophical view. On a more practical level, I think within 2 or 3 years, we won't even be talking about AI anymore. I think that we've just been incorporated into a mainstream in the way that we don't talk about internet search engines anymore. We don't say you need to look it up on HTTPS new dots / dot. We don't, in the old days, we used to say, yes, it's www dot, that's all changed because that's just our practice. So we'll get acclimatized this very quickly.
Yeah.
So what used to be a simple internet search will be an AI generated summary, and then we'll move beyond that as well, and we'll get used to all of that. I think it'll become just in the same way we got used to cash machines, we got used to telephone systems, automatic telephone systems when you call your insurance company. So I think all of that will just become our regular everyday life.
Yeah.
I guess the kind of the big dark cloud, as people say, yeah, what about all these jobs? My own hunch is that we're going to create as many jobs as we lose.
Right.
Because I think that's what we tend to do. Whether those jobs are strictly necessary is another story. But I think that's just what we'll end up doing, because that's our nature, is to survive. So you can't have it if we took the kind of extreme end of the AI story, which says, all these admin jobs, all these functionalities will be removed from people.
Yeah.
There'll be no travel agency. It's just going to be agentic AI. There'll be, if we take that extreme view, that would be, from a society point of view, so completely, entirely catastrophic that it would bring governments down and would start revolutions. They won't want that to happen, and we don't have the money to pay for that. So there will have to be a balance found between we're going to save money, we're going to become more efficient through AI, but that cannot mean that we lose 90% of the workforce.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense for us as a society. So someone will have to deal with that issue, because we have to think beyond silos at some level. We can't possibly just think about, my company in my world will become more efficient. That might be true, but if those people have no disposable income to spend on your products, you're leaving yourself without a market. And if we still have an economy which is fundamentally based on consumption, which it is, if we're not consuming for any money, and that's already a problem for society. So we've already got this kind of problem with the middle class. The middle class are earning less and less and less, relatively speaking. Well, I mean, this is not sustainable, because the economy is propped up on the idea that we keep on spending money. So either someone kind of does something about that, or I think so. So to me, AI is it's another tech thing which is going to radically transform things, but we're going to have to stay one step,
and we will adapt.
Ahead of it, to the side of it.
I think also, would you agree that it depends on a bit the lens you look at it through? So if you look at a very short-term lens, it can be a bit scary. Just as I imagine the person who had a major horse business in 1880, that along came the motor car, and they were absolutely terrified. And I'm sure they will have said the world is going to end because the whole place will choke on fumes, and there would have been all sorts of calculations. And I think Henry Ford said, if I listen to my customers, that what they say is make me a faster horse, right? And that what happened was that there was an adaptation, and we've kind of forgotten all that and the details of the people who were caught up in that at the time. I'm sure some people went and sold all their horses and bought a car, and other people hung on to their horses desperately trying to make it still work. And that it'll happen again. I guess the thing about AI for me is the speed that is happening and the extent to which it potentially takes away. So for me, one area that I think is really interesting is not directly connected to your area of creativity, but in education, that at the moment we place value on knowledge. And so people do exams to prove that they've learned things. So we're going to have to shift that, aren't we? Because knowledge is going to be so available and so readily available. So I would tend to agree with you that we something will happen. And it doesn't have to be all bad.
No, and I think there's a lot of good stuff in AI. I mean, there's a lot of applications. We're seeing this with some of our clients, that some of the things that they're doing are really interesting. And in the medical care area, I mean, AI can can provide kind of exponential benefits, huge benefits, and we all can benefit from that. So, I mean, if you are able to kind of manage a national health system or a national social security system with better technology, better data, more analysis of data, more consistent results, what's not to like? And who's not going to be in favor of having better testing, more frequent testing, better application modeling? I mean, so I think it's important also, because fundamentally I think it's about life. It's just important to be optimistic. I think I don't like the idea of I don't like gloom, basically, Eddie. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I mean, and so therefore I might just be having my ostrich head might be going directly into the sand here.
But it sounds to me like your ostrich head is not going in the sand.
I don't like being pessimistic. I find it boring and gloomy, and I don't really want to sit around at parties or on saying everything is going wrong. We're all going to be out of a job. Everything. I just find that tedious. And I prefer to think, and I might well be wrong, but I prefer to think that good things are going to happen, because I find that a necessary part of getting up every morning. And so therefore it might well be that I'm just deluding myself.
Like everything else and other things we've talked about today, it's not going to go back in its box, just in the same way that the people who liked horses a lot, there was a lot of dung on the streets of big cities, and then that all went away. Those people were not going to be able to convince anybody to hang on to horses.
And of course some jobs will go. I mean, of course they will. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, back in the day, people went to the river to wash their clothes. Well, we don't do that by and large anymore. We have washing machines. And, we used to hang them on the line, and some of us still do, but a lot of people use a tumble dryer. And I mean, automation will always replace human jobs. Of course it will. It's obvious, so, but something else will tend to come along. to replace it, because we have to make sure it does. Otherwise, we're in big trouble as a society.
And it tends to be a balance. I mean, I remember about the year 2000, I was working in an online travel agency, which was a brand new thing. And a lot of people were predicting at the time that kind of the travel agency would just die. Why would you need it anymore? You can just book it all online. And of course, in the end, it balances out, because the travel agency is great for some things and the booking online is great for others. And so it isn't usually a black and white outcome.
No, it rarely is.
It's an evolution.
Yeah. And back in the day, we had, with the pandemic, we had, everyone was buying online, right? So it was the death of the supermarket. You will never go back to shops, and this is the end of the high street, and it's the end of the shopping centre. And there is some truth in that, because commercial high streets are struggling in some respects, but they struggle when they carry on trying to do exactly what they were doing 20 or 30 years ago. But if they change and do other things, but people don't want to buy online everything all the time, because it's boring, and because you want to see and feel what you're buying, and because you feel like getting out of the house and having a coffee and going for a walk and getting the kids out of the house. We're not human beings. We're not entirely straightforward.
But also, we do tend to push back on change. Just naturally, quick anecdote, my mother lived in a small English village, and there was a little shop, which was a sweet little shop, and people liked it. And then somebody wanted to build a kind of medium-sized supermarket on the edge of the village. And there was such a massive outcry about it. And it went on for years, and they tried to block it, and all sorts of things happened. And people said that children would be run over by the traffic generated. And in the end, what we actually got was a completely different little shop in the village, which was much, much better, because it became more like a delicatessen, and not just the place where people went for ice creams and stuff. And we did get this new supermarket, which now everybody uses, of course. And no one's been run over,
because it's very convenient.
But if you look at the S-curve of that evolution, it started with tremendous negativity.
And also, this is a railway rush as well. It's a gold rush and it's a railway rush. So, I mean, of course, at the moment, a ton of the money that's getting spent on air will be wasted, in the sense that it's not all going to bring an ROI, just because any kind of huge growth in investment won't. So there will be a fallout. I mean, not everything that has been touched by AI will be successful, because it never is. So some of the stuff that people are working on in Silicon Valley and in China and elsewhere, or wherever the kind of the big power bases are, not all of that is going to be quite so transformative as they would like it to be. Just in the same way the .com thing happened, and not everything quite went the way that people thought it was going to go.
It very often went different ways from people expected. And one of the things was text messages, which at the time seemed like terribly boring and old-fashioned, but actually is what evolved into Twitter and all these other things that massively changed the world. Okay, so 21 years of DMA, lots of very interesting things have happened, and now you've actually sold the business, even though I think you're still involved for a bit, right?
So I'm answering your question before you've asked it, I think.
Well, my question is, how do you feel about that, and what's next for DM?
For DM. I sold DMA Partners last year to an agency in the UK called Finally.
Right.
It was a good fit. They're a B2B creative agency, marketing agency. We've got some good clients. We've got a good team, and I think it's a good fit. And so they're doing a pretty good job, I think, of taking the whole thing over. I'm still involved because I know a lot about DMA and the clients and the work. So I'm still involved, and I will be for the foreseeable future. But of course, I'm at the, let's call it the twilight end of the career. So I'm still pretty young and reasonably, I'm with it.
There's still plenty of life.
There's still plenty of life, but obviously I'm not going to be the plan for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. So Rob Dando, who owns Finally, is that plan with his team. So that's great. So I'm kind of, my role will be diminished obviously over time. So next steps, I would say that I'm keeping pretty open, Eddie, really. I mean, I don't, honestly, I can't say that I have a big project that I'm planning. So I've not had an ambition to open a flower shop or to get a camper van and go around Southeast Asia. So I don't have any specific plans. I've got various projects I'm working on. I did write a book a couple of years back, or a year or two back.
Read it.
Okay, well there you go. So, and I'm planning to do more writing, more creative, my own personal kind of writing. But I'm just interested in what I do feel like the doors will open.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a reasonably energetic kind of creative person, so I think as I start to meet people, as I start to kind of think and read and work on things, I think opportunities will emerge.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it will be in the creative area somehow.
And I do some coaching work with people who are in the sort of stage of life that both of us are in now, which is that we've done quite a lot of things and we're kind of transferring into doing slightly different things. And one of the interesting things is that you don't need to know what it is you're going to do when you stop doing the thing that you've been doing for years. It's perfectly okay to give yourself permission to have even a couple of years of kind of thinking and reflecting. Probably you do need something, because I think we're all going to live a lot longer than our grandparents did. And we've got to have good reasons to get up in the morning, and we've got to feel good about that. To your optimism point, I think that we want to get up in the morning feeling excited about the day.
Sure.
How we go about that, and whether that's opening the flower shop or writing a book or just going for a walk in the woods, it doesn't. Each one of us can make that choice.
Yeah,
but,
I think that's right. There's got to be some. A friend of mine recently was saying to me, I think he put it very well. He said, you have to kind of take some deliberate action. So, think a bit about it and take some steps. But the steps don't have to be definitive ones. They can just be little steps which might lead to somewhere else. You're not entirely sure where you need to go. I agree with you. I think you don't always need the answers. Just
and I don't think that one should underestimate that these things aren't necessarily that easy. My analogy of the hamster wheel, and how, when we're busy and working, the hamster wheel is constantly running and we're constantly running on it. And we complain about it all the time. Oh, if only I could do this, and I'd like to have a week off. And if I had a week off, I'd do this, I'd go sailing. But weirdly, when we have the week off, we don't go sailing. We sit at home kind of slightly missing work. So the reality is that if we have to start our own hamster wheel, it's always hard. But when we do get it going and we've started it, and it's not somebody else telling us what to do, which actually leads us back very nicely to the beginning of our conversation about your reasons for wanting to set up DMA, which was autonomy. And I think you're heading into a time of even greater autonomy. So I congratulate you on that.
Put it like that. That sounds great.
And so I think I'd like to wrap up our conversation here. I've really enjoyed listening to you. You've had a fascinating professional life so far, with more to come, I have a feeling.
Hey, let's hope so.
Thank you very much indeed, David.